My name's Marcus, and I live in a four-story apartment building on the east side of the city. Not the nice part, but not the worst either. Just old brick, peeling paint, and neighbors who kept to themselves. The building had 12 units, a mix of old-timers and young folks like me, grinding through life. I was 32, single, working double shifts at a warehouse to pay rent. That night, I was looking forward to a quiet evening. Leftover Chinese, a baseball game on my ancient TV, and maybe a few beers before bed. The power went out at 9:47 p.m. I know because I glanced at my phone, the screen glowing in the sudden darkness. The TV died, the refrigerator hummed into silence, and the building settled into a hush that felt wrong. I waited for the lights to flicker back on. They usually did, a few seconds of inconvenience. But the minutes stretched, and the darkness held. I pulled back my curtain, looking out at the street. The whole block was dark. Not just our building, but the apartments across the road, the convenience store on the corner, the streetlights, all of it swallowed by shadow. A citywide outage, I figured. Maybe a transformer blew. I grabbed my flashlight, a habit from camping trips as a kid, and headed to the hallway to check the stairwell. The building was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear my own footsteps on the worn carpet, the creak of the floorboards under my weight. Mrs. Patterson in 2B usually had her TV blaring at this hour. Catholic dramas, I think. Nothing. Mr. Kim in 3A was a night owl, always cooking something garlicky that drifted through the vents. Nothing. The silence pressed against my ears, thick and expectant. I knocked on a few doors. No answer. The lights came back on at 10:15, fluorescent buzz filling the hallway, and I laughed it off. A temporary glitch, nothing more. But when I returned to my apartment, I noticed something. Mrs. Patterson's door was slightly ajar, her cat usually meowing on her porch now absent. I figured she was just forgetful, maybe visiting her daughter. The thought niggled at me, but I pushed it aside, climbed into bed, and tried to sleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, like the air itself had changed. Outside my window, the streetlights flickered once, twice, then steadied. And in that strobing light, I swore I saw a shadow move across the rooftop of the building across the way, a shape that didn't belong, too tall, too still. Then darkness again, and the shape was gone. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of light that makes you question if you slept at all. I woke with a headache, the remnants of a dream I couldn't quite remember. Something about knocking on doors, silence answering back. The power had held through the night, but the building felt different. The elevator was out of service, a notice taped to the doors, handwritten in a scrawl I didn't recognize. Out of order. Do not use. The stairs it was. Mrs. Patterson's door was still open. I hesitated outside, calling her name. No response. The apartment beyond was dark, the smell of stale air and something else, something sweet, almost floral, but off. I stepped inside, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Her furniture was covered in white sheets, dust motes floating in the light. The kitchen table had a plate of untouched cookies, the milk beside them curdled and thick. When did she leave? How long had this been happening? I backed out, my heart hammering. The other apartments, doors closed, silence behind them. I knocked on 2C, a young couple with a newborn. No answer. 2D, an older man who collected model trains. Nothing. My breathing quickened as I moved to the third floor, then the fourth. Every door I tried was locked, but the silence behind them felt absolute, like no one had been home for days. I ran down to the lobby, where Mrs. Chun, our building manager, usually held court behind her desk. Her office was empty, computer off, papers stacked neatly, a half-drunk cup of tea gone cold. Her apartment door, adjacent to the office, was locked too. I banged on it, calling her name. The echo of my own voice was the only answer. Outside, the street was quiet. Not just early morning quiet, but abandoned quiet. The convenience store's lights were off, the shelves inside bare, like they'd been cleared out in a hurry. The cars on the curb were still there, but a layer of dust coated their roofs. When had it last rained? I pulled out my phone. No signal. The Wi-Fi at the coffee shop across the street, usually open, wasn't detecting any networks. I walked toward the main road, hoping to flag down a car, see another person. Nothing. The city stretched before me, buildings standing like sentinels, but the streets were empty. No traffic, no pedestrians, no sound except the wind and my own footsteps. It was like everyone had simply vanished, leaving only the structures behind. And then I saw it. A shape in a second-story window, watching me. It didn't move, didn't wave. Just stood there, a silhouette against the gloom. I waved back, shouting, "Hey, can you help me?" The shape didn't respond. When I blinked, it was gone. I ran back to the building, slamming the door behind me. The lock clicked, automatic, electronic, a feature I'd never noticed before. The hallway was darker than it should have been, the overhead lights dimming in and out like a failing heartbeat. I climbed the stairs, counting the steps, trying to calm myself. Maybe this was a dream. Maybe I'd fallen asleep after those beers and hadn't woken up yet. But the details were too sharp. The smell of the carpet, old and musty. The cold draft from the broken window on the second landing. The creak of the third-floor hallway, which always sounded like someone stepping just ahead of you. I reached my apartment, fumbling with the key, and ducked inside. The phone on my landline was dead, no dial tone, just static when I picked it up. I tried the TV, snow, that hiss of nothing. My cell still showed no signal, the clock reading 7:42 a.m., but the light outside was wrong. Too dim, like the sun was struggling to break through. I sat on my couch, head in my hands, and tried to think rationally. Mass evacuation? Some kind of quarantine? But there would have been warnings, news, something. The knock came at 8:15 p.m. 3 sharp raps on my door, deliberate, like a signal. I froze, listening. Another knock. Then a voice, soft, feminine, trembling. "Please, is anyone there? I'm scared." Sarah from 4A. I knew her vaguely. We'd exchanged nods in the elevator, nothing more. Her voice sounded wrong, pitched too high, like she was holding back panic. I opened the door a crack. She was there, huddled in the hallway, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed. "I haven't seen anyone since yesterday," she whispered. "The building's empty. I can hear things in the walls, whispers, but no one's there." I pulled her inside, locking the door behind us. She was shaking, her hands ice cold. We talked in hushed voices, piecing together what we knew. She'd been at a friend's place across town when the power went out. Walked back because her phone died, expecting to find the city alive with outage chaos. Instead, silence. Empty streets. Buildings dark. "I ran," she said. "I ran all the way here, and nothing. No cars, no people. Just shadows in the windows." As she spoke, I heard it too. A faint whisper coming from the walls themselves. Not words, just a susurrus, like static or wind. But it moved, shifting from one side of the room to the other, passing through the plaster like it wasn't there at all. Sarah and I decided to search the building together. Safety in numbers, we told ourselves, though the dread in the pit of my stomach said otherwise. We gathered what we could, flashlights, a pocket knife, bottled water, and began methodically checking each floor. The 4th floor was identical to the others, doors closed, silence behind them. But as we moved through the hallway, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. I could almost make out words, syllables that didn't form any language I knew. Sarah grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Do you hear that?" she breathed. I did. And beneath the whispers, something else, a wet, rhythmic sound, like breathing, coming from inside one of the apartments. We stood before 4C, the source of the sound. The door was slightly open, a sliver of darkness beyond. Sarah shook her head, pulling me away. "Don't," she said. "Please." But curiosity, or something darker, the need to understand, won out. I pushed the door open. The apartment was frozen in time. A half-eaten meal on the kitchen table, the food rotted but not decomposed. A book open on the couch, pages yellowed and brittle. A calendar on the wall, The date circled in red, 3 weeks ago. The breathing sound was louder now, coming from the bedroom. I crept forward, Sarah trailing behind me, her flashlight trembling in her grip. The bedroom was empty. The bed was made, crisp sheets tucked in tight. But the breathing continued, closer now, like something was standing just out of sight. I turned, scanning the room, and caught a glimpse of something in the mirror. A shape, humanoid but wrong. Too tall, its limbs bending at angles that didn't make sense. It was smiling, I think, though it had no mouth. I stumbled backward, Sarah screaming, and when I looked again, the mirror showed only our reflection, pale and terrified. We fled back to my apartment, locking the door, pushing the couch against it. Sarah cried, her sobs muffled against her hands. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, my mind racing. The calendar. 3 weeks. But it had only been one night since the power went out. Tom was wrong. Everything was wrong. That night, we slept in shifts, though neither of us really slept. The whispers never stopped, growing in volume until they felt like a physical pressure against our skulls. And once, just before dawn, I heard a knock on my window, 3 sharp raps, like before. When I looked, there was nothing. But the glass was cold, frosted from the outside, as if something had been pressing against it for hours. 3 days. That's how long Sarah and I lasted before the paranoia set in. The building had become a prison, the hallways a labyrinth of silence and whispers. We rationed what food we could find, canned goods from other apartments, stale bread from Mrs. Patterson's kitchen. But the water was running low, and the whispers were getting louder, more insistent. They felt like a presence, watching, waiting for us to break. Sarah changed. By the second day, she stopped eating, staring at the walls for hours on end. "They're talking about us," she murmured, her voice distant. "The walls. They're deciding what to do with us." I tried to reassure her, but I could hear it too. My name, repeated over and over, in voices I didn't recognize. Jake's voice, Mrs. Patterson's, people who were gone. On the third night, she stopped speaking altogether. She sat in the corner of my apartment, knees drawn to her chest, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I tried to touch her shoulder, and she flinched, hissing like an animal. "Don't," she whispered. "They're listening. They're always listening." I backed away, my own fear spiraling. The decision came at midnight. I couldn't stay anymore. The building was changing, hallways longer than they should be, staircases that led to floors that didn't exist, doors that opened into closets instead of apartments. I had to leave, had to find help, had to escape before I lost myself like Sarah. I packed what I could, slinging a bag over my shoulder, and turned to tell her I was going. She was gone. No sound, no struggle, just an empty corner where she'd been sitting. The window was open, the curtains billowing in the wind, and for a moment, I thought I saw her silhouette on the rooftop across the way, standing perfectly still, arms at her sides. I called her name, my voice cracking. The figure didn't turn. It just stood there, watching, as if waiting for me to follow. I ran, down the stairs, through the lobby, out the front door into the night. The streets were still empty, the city still silent. But the shadows had moved. They were closer now, clustered in doorways, lingering at the edges of my flashlight's beam. I could feel eyes on me, hundreds of them, tracking my progress as I ran. I made it 3 blocks before I heard the footsteps behind me. Not running, just walking, deliberate and patient, like it knew I couldn't escape. I turned, shining my light into the darkness. Nothing. But the footsteps continued, closer now, accompanied by that wet breathing sound I'd heard in the apartment. I kept running, turning down alleyways, cutting through parking lots. The city blurred around me, familiar landmarks becoming alien in the darkness. And then I saw it. A building I didn't recognize, tall and angular, its windows dark, but its doors slightly open, spilling warmth into the night. I ducked inside, slamming the door behind me. The lobby was pristine, white marble floors, a reception desk with a computer still humming. A directory on the wall listed the occupants, 12 stories, each with a dozen offices. The elevator was working, its doors sliding open with a ding. I stepped inside, pressing the button for the roof. Maybe I could see the city from above, find a way out, find help. The doors closed, and the elevator began to rise. But it didn't stop at the first floor, or the second, or the third. It went higher, past 12, past 20, the numbers climbing into absurdity. The elevator shuddered, the lights flickering, and then it stopped at a floor that had no number, just a blank button. The doors slid open to reveal darkness. Not the absence of light, but something thicker, heavier. I stepped out, my flashlight beams swallowed by the gloom. The whispers returned, surrounding me, pressing in from all sides. And in the darkness, I saw them. Dozens of shapes, standing in a circle, their heads tilted toward me. I don't know how long I was on that floor. Hours, maybe. The shapes didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching me with eyes that weren't eyes, just voids, hungry and ancient. I tried to run back to the elevator, but the hallway stretched, elongating with each step I took, the doors receding into the distance. I woke up in my own apartment, sunlight streaming through the window. The door was locked from the inside, the couch pushed against it just as I'd left it. Sarah was gone. The bag I'd packed was by the door, untouched. I checked my phone, signal, full bars, the time reading 8:15 a.m. The same time as 3 days ago. I don't know what happened. The city is alive again. Cars on the streets, people on the sidewalks, the hum of normalcy restored. But the building is empty. All 12 units, cleared out. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Kim, the young couple with the newborn gone. The authorities have no records of them ever living there. The landlord, Mrs. Chun, doesn't exist. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the whispers. They come through the walls, through the window, through the phone when I pick it up to make a call. They're quieter now, patient, like they're waiting for me to forget, to move on, to let my guard down. And last night, I saw Sarah, standing across the street, watching my apartment window. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just stood there, perfectly still, her eyes empty. When I blinked, she was gone. But the window she was standing in front of, the one across the way, was dark, the curtains drawn. And in the glass, I saw her reflection turning, walking away, her silhouette merging with the shadows. I'm packing now. I don't know where I'll go, but I can't stay. The walls have ears, and they're talking about me again.